We are in the last few years of normal people having access to owning real UTXOs, real Bitcoin. It's going to be so expensive per coin that you're just going to have shared UTXOs. You're going to be a second-class citizen. And I think it's a big waste. It is so simple. If you can drive, you can have a metal plate and a Coldcard.
Francis and Bull Bitcoin, do you see this coming to America too?
Yeah, it's boiling frog. That's how it's always done. Until things change, get the f out. If you're gonna follow BIP 110, power to you. Do your thing. You're free to do so. You could be sending your coins into like a burning address. So essentially, you could lose your money. I think that people forgot about the memes, right? And money only exists through memes. It's important for people not to forget that Bitcoin is an idea. That's what happened in this cycle. I am very bullish because America is one of the only places in the world where people work. It is a country that decided to win again. You could make the case that if Kamala had won, Bitcoin would be worth a lot more now.
That is NVK, founder of Coinkite and the creator of the Coldcard. NVK's view is that most Bitcoiners have been distracted, trying to outgain BTC, missing the real opportunity in front of them, and that the window to act is closing faster than people think. We get into how governments are increasingly putting Bitcoiners' identities at risk. Right now, they are boiling frogs, and new legislation that started in the EU and is coming to North America just dealt a major blow to Bitcoin privacy. His warning is clear. The same forces closing in on us are exactly what make this the best moment in history to build, but only if you take advantage of open source money and open source intelligence before you end up a second-class citizen. You'll also want to stick around for his take on BIP 110 and what it could mean for you and your stack. I'm your host, Rob Wallace. Welcome back to the Bitcoin News Channel. Let's get into it. All right, NVK, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start off this conversation with some statistics. In 2026, there's one violent attack on a French crypto holder every 2.5 days. 82% of all physical attacks on crypto holders happen in Europe and 70% in France. They projected that by the end of this year, 150 to 180 victims of violent attacks in France. And in half of those cases, it's not the crypto holder themselves, but a family member that is kidnapped. For someone just tuning in and hearing these crazy statistics, help us paint the picture. Why is it so dangerous to be a Bitcoin holder in Europe right now?
Well, Europe has some of the most draconian laws regarding KYC. For people that don't know what KYC means, it means know your customer. So service providers, right, related to money services businesses. So for example, exchanges, brokerages, the ones that do the in-between fiat and crypto, they are required to get a lot of information from their customers, right, and keep it in their databases, which always leak. And then you also have absolutely insane non-private taxation laws regarding to crypto there, where the person is obligated to share exactly the addresses, how much they own, and all kinds of information that are, the most desired information by the bad guys, right? So if you're a bad guy, you don't want to go knocking on doors, figuring out who have Bitcoin and who doesn't. You want a sure thing. So what happened is you have a lot of corrupt government officials in France selling information on crypto holders to the gangs who then go and rob, kidnap people. It's absolute insanity out there right now. So, until things change, honestly, get the fuck out. Honestly, I don't think, security practices help. Making sure you're not allowed to spend your own Bitcoin with, a multitude of solutions help. But at the end of the day, if somebody kidnaps your kid, you're going to find a way, to pay. So, there is no alternative. If you are doxxed by the French government of your taxes and you have a lot of Bitcoin, leave.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. And all exchanges, KYC pretty much around the world, right? So this information is there, but is not widely shared with governments, right? The governments don't know how much Bitcoin people buy unless there's a subpoena, like they use the law to go and ask for it. But in France, this new law, DAC 8, requests that the exchanges tell the government absolutely everything, the identities and the transaction volume of each and every customer that these exchanges have. And it's so funny how this got painted, right? In 2020, the powers came together in Europe and they asked, okay, there's this Bitcoin thing. We're going to need a lot of money. People might take their funds out of our continent using Bitcoin. We need to find a way in order to keep it trapped here. So they came up with CARF, C-A-R-F, Crypto Asset Reporting Framework. And so, I mean, can you just paint the difference between regular KYC and then this totally out of bounds?
Yeah. So normally what happens is like government, like let's pretend for a second, right? The government is not horrible. Just for 1 second, of course, is not true. But let's just pretend to keep it simple. They want to make sure that the people who are buying and selling assets, right? They are not terrorists. They are not money launderers. They are not, criminals, right? So that is the spirit of the law, right? So what happens is they essentially deputize businesses who buy and sell crypto to essentially check the personal information of the people buying and selling, doing business with them, and making sure that they're not said criminals, right? And these deputized companies are supposed to keep this information in case the government finds somebody that they need to find information from. Say, for example, somebody kidnapped somebody, paid ransom in Bitcoin, and they sold the Bitcoin on some exchange, right? They want to go there and say, hey, please give me the idea of this guy, right? So, should businesses be deputized to do this? Absolutely not, right? But that is the spirit of the original sort of like idea, the original law, right? And that happens to everything, like gold, all kinds of different assets have that. When you go buy and sell stuff in different sort of scales, you have to do some of that. Now, what happened is, this sort of like frameworks get weaponized, right, to essentially extort people, from their hard-earned Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a very liquid asset. So governments are afraid that people are just going to run away with them. But also, there is a lot of nefarious stuff happening, right? Like, these are all corrupt people that want to make money. So they want to make sure they have the information to then sell to bad guys. I mean, it's not complicated. It's like, I want more information so I can sell the information for people to kidnap you. That's literally what's happening.
It's insane. And Francis and Bull Bitcoin in France are finally taking it to the courts to try to stop this insanity. He said he's willing to take it all the way to the highest courts in Europe if need be. What do you think are their chances of actually winning this case?
I haven't reviewed the case. I'm friends with Francis. I've asked him a little bit about it. I think they have like a decent shot. If anything, it gets attention to it, so sometimes you can get population to see it. Hopefully they bring a lot of evidence that becomes public as well, regarding all the numbers around kidnappings and things like that. Listen, I'm always very bearish on trying to change government and try to change laws. I believe that, people have more success by voting with their feet. Unfortunately, that is the world we live in right now. I do think that long term things will get better. I have no doubt about that, because what we have right now is unsustainable. As soon as politicians have big Bitcoin bags and their kid get kidnapped, things will change, right? Unfortunately, that is the only way we're going to see real change. Look at America right now. They have a Bitcoin holder president. The environment gets better, right? The only path for Bitcoin is to have as much adoption as by the people you don't like.
True. And one of the reasons that Francis says he's doing this is because the CARF, there's plans for it to come to Canada, I think this next year, and then the US in 2028, 2029. So this slow totalitarian creep is the way that they take away our freedoms, right? Just these small incremental changes.
That's right.
And do you see this coming to America too?
Yeah, it's boiling frog. That's how it's always done.
Yeah. It's insane. And one way that we like to protect against this in Bitcoin, of course, is self-custody. And when I got hardcore into Bitcoin about 6 years ago, I mean, you couldn't scroll on Twitter once without seeing not your keys, not your coins. But that whole entire self-custody ethos seems to have dissipated bunch in the last couple of years, right?
It's interesting out there.
Yeah. So give us your take. I mean, you've been in self-custody for over a decade. Tell us your view on how self-custody has evolved over the years.
Not your keys, not your coins, not your keys, not your coins. It's not complicated, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the reality is like Bitcoin essentially offers two things, right? Two main value propositions, right? One is anti-debasement, right? So don't get poor slowly, right? And the other thing is sovereignty, right? So I think what happened in this last cycle is, a lot of Bitcoiners decided to chase only, the multiples through the Bitcoin treasury companies, which were honestly not designed for the average person, right? Like those are great, investment instruments for entities that are not allowed to buy Bitcoin, right? Or for very sophisticated investors that want to play the markets, right? Like it's sophisticated gambling, right? That's what financial markets are. And I think a lot of people got confused with that. And we have a fairly stable financial system in this sort of last few years. So people maybe got a little bit more confidence in that. But remember, like that's not Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin is like a real digital asset, right? That you own and you sign with your Coldcard, right? So you don't have to ask permission from your trading account brokerage, right, to remove your Bitcoin from some system, right? Like with Bitcoin, if you buy it on an exchange, you put in your Coldcard, they are yours, right? No permission, it's private, and you can take it anywhere you want in the world in seconds, right? You can send it anywhere in seconds. Like we have never had a system of property available to humans ever, right? And to just simply waste that, because somebody promises you, maybe a 15% over Bitcoin's like appreciation is absolutely insane, right? So I get it. Some people need cash, some people need yield. They are after some of these financial products, but you cannot confuse the two. Real Bitcoin, it is very precious. We are in the last few years of normal people having access to owning like real UTXOs, real Bitcoin, and having enough Bitcoin to even put in a hardware wallet, right? In a few years, it's going to be so expensive per coin that you're just going to have shared UTXOs. You're going to have you're going to be a second class citizen. And I think it's a big waste.
Yeah, and one thing I've learned in trying to do this whole entire Bitcoin education thing for the last couple of years is that it takes an extreme amount of responsibility to go and take self-custody of your Bitcoin, right? And the majority of the population honestly doesn't really have that. I mean, what is your take on responsibility, self-custody, and how many people are actually ready for that?
I get a lot of trouble sometimes saying Bitcoin is not for everyone. Bitcoin is available to anyone, right? And that's true for real gold as well, right? That's true for most things that you decide to be your own bank, right? Being your own bank, having sovereignty comes with a lot of responsibility, right? But the reality is, like, when you do have the opportunity and you have this super easy to use tools and you have all this education, and you have the right timing, like, there is absolutely no excuse. There is no excuse to not have responsibility right now. I like to akin like Bitcoin self custody to driving, right? Like, do you want to depend on the bus and the subway? Like, look, during COVID, you need a QR for that, right? Like, listen, if most people are capable of putting their family in the car, which is the thing that like it's like top 3 killing things in the planet, right? So if you're willing to put your family in a car, and going to a highway, driving with everybody else at like 100 kilometers an hour, 150 kilometers an hour in some places, you should be able to self custody a few $1,000s or more by yourself. It's not that hard. Like, do you start driving in the highway? Absolutely not, right? You started in the parking lot. So you buy a little bit of Bitcoin, you withdraw that little Bitcoin to a phone wallet, for example. You learn how to back up, you learn how to use it, and then you buy a hardware wallet, and then you buy more Bitcoin, right? Like, I made a little website called bitcoinsecurity.org. It just helps you sort of like with some basics and make some of the analogies about the car driving. And I think that like if you can drive a car and you understand the car value proposition, you should be able to understand Bitcoin's self-custody value proposition.
And so there's the responsibility part, and that's natural, right? If you're a family man, you've got people to take care of, like you should be willing to take responsibility over your family's financial future. But I think there's also sort of a paranoid aspect to it too, right? I mean, I've been labeled a conspiracy theorist, and I don't trust the banks, right? Like I don't trust the powers that be, and that's why I am so gravitated towards Bitcoin. Whereas a lot of people in the West, they don't see it that way. They trust their bank and they think that everything's going to be fine forever. So that's why Bitcoin has a greater value prop to places in the world that have been through debasement and confiscation and whatnot in the past. So do you think that it's going to take some sort of catastrophic event to make Westerners in America and the first world understand the importance of self-custody?
I think Americans specifically is interesting, right? Because Americans take already a lot of personal responsibility for a lot more things than other places in the world do, right? Like you can pay for your own health care, you can have guns for your personal security. Most people drive, right? Like most people have like, their little lot of land where, they maybe produce food. So it is a country where people are a little bit more self-sufficient in that sense. So I don't think it's a hard value prop, right? It's just that there is different Americas, right? You have the commie Americas, where everybody, rides the subway, they're against guns, and they don't, and they believe in the banks, and the vaccine is for your safety. So like different people, different needs. People are going to find racking, at some point. And then you have other countries where you're not allowed to take personal responsibilities for a lot of things, right? So for people, it might be a bigger leap, right, to understand that. But Europe has seen more wars in their own like front yard, than pretty much any other place in the first world, right? So for them, it shouldn't be that hard to understand that banks fail, gold gets stolen, dudes knock on your door and then kidnap your family. It's kind of very obvious. It's all right there, right? I think it is not for everyone, but I think enough people see the value of this the same way they see the value of gold, the same way they see the value of cash. I don't think you need to be a conspiracy person to be into holding Bitcoin. Although, some people are going to get wrecked. I mean, look at what happened to Canadians during the truckers, right? Like people's bank accounts got frozen. And that's like, the pinnacle of a stable, reasonable, middle of the ground kind of first world country. I mean, it was. Like, and then like all of a sudden, because you have the big flu, people's bank accounts get frozen because they donated $10 to a bunch of truckers that oppose the thing. Like regardless of your politics, I mean, it's absolute insanity that you have a country like a first world country like that have bank accounts frozen, right? It goes to prove to you that it is possible. And it is likely that will happen if there is another world event. And there's always going to be a black swan event in the world, right? It's just you hope that those black swans don't happen to you, right? Nobody wishes they have a earthquake in their house just to prove that their generators work.
Yeah.
Right? You test your generators.
Yeah. So then let's talk about the ultimate setup. I've heard you say that you think that self-custody is widely solved. As long as you've got a metal plate, a Coldcard, and Sparrow wallet, you're pretty much set.
You're set.
That's it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, and it is so simple, right? I mean, like most people can have custody of a piece of metal, right? A flat sheet of metal that can fit in an envelope, right? Through their whole lives, just fine. Like, I mean, people do that. People do that with stock certificates. People do that with like little bars of gold. People do that with jewelry. People do that with nice watches. People do that with like some family heirloom, right? Like it's not complicated. Is it the optimal setup? Absolutely not. But like it is incredibly good, right? Like you have a metal backup that fire cannot, destroy. And then you have like a device that is very secure, right, capable of doing the operations for you, and then you can set some other sort of like spending limits on it or whatever, so that you're not at personal risk, right? And like and Bitcoin takes care of the rest, right? I mean, it really is simple. So like I think that the majority of the population, if you can drive, you can have a metal plate and a cold card. Like, it really is like driving is much harder.
How many apps does it take to manage your Bitcoin? One to buy, one to send, one for Lightning, and another for loans. That's a lot of friction. Well, now there's Rhino. Listen to the end, and I'll tell you how they'll set you up with $10 of free Bitcoin. Rhino is a next-generation Bitcoin app that makes living on Bitcoin easy. At Rhino, you can buy Bitcoin with 0 fees. Get a Bitcoin-backed loan right in the app. Move cash globally over Bitcoin rails fast and easy. Automate your stacking with a DCA plan, so your stack is growing, whether the market is up, down, or you're touching grass. And it doesn't stop there. Bill pay, debit and credit cards, as well as retirement accounts are all coming soon. At Rhino, your Bitcoin is never rehypothecated. Security comes first, with biometric verification, 24/7 fraud protection, and the ability to move your Bitcoin to self-custody whenever you're ready. Click the link below in the description and download Rhino for iOS or Android. Use code Bitcoin News and Rhino will drop you $10 of free Bitcoin right into your wallet to start you on your stacking journey. Get the most Bitcoin for your dollar with Rhino. So then let's talk about some of the common mistakes that people make when they set up their self-custody. I mean, one common one is that people usually keep the metal plate and the cold card in the same place. What are some other mistakes that people make?
So I think a lot of the mistakes are sort of like over sort of emphasized on social media. Right? I feel like most people, I mean, we've been selling these devices and our competitors too for, like about over a decade now, right? And honestly, like through support, we see that, the support does not reflect social media, right? Like we don't see people losing money, right? That's very uncommon. Because again, like people are capable of putting the seed plate, right, their metal plate, somewhere and their device somewhere else, right? So you have the backup kind of like distributed from the other device. People are capable of maybe making a backup, so 2 plates. Maybe they put in a safe deposit box. Is that the best place? No, because police can get there, right? Accidentally see it. But you can put like maybe you can split the secret, right? Like there's many ways that you should research that. Like in a simple sort of pod is not the best way for me to give specific advice, but so mistakes people make, they don't make a backup. That's number one mistake. Like they go like, oh, I'm just gonna write it on a piece of paper, or not gonna write it right now. I'll do it later, and then they forget. Time passes. They run over their hardware wallet of a car. The thing's broken, and then shit out of luck, right? So mistake number one is don't make a backup. So make a backup. I think mistake number 2 that people make is not checking the address that they're sending to from the exchange to the device to make sure, because sometimes people have viruses on their laptops and things. So when they're sending crypto to an exchange, they don't check the address is correct. Maybe the browser is showing them a different address. So that's an important one to check. Third mistake, big one. People forget to withdraw from the exchanges. So they'll buy the cold card, they will set up their backup, and then they'll forget to withdraw. They just leave it there, right? So do that. Another important thing to do is always withdraw a little bit first, right? So send $50, test that you got the thing, test the backup works. So you wrote the seeds down right? And then withdraw everything. And I think that's pretty much it for like sort of common mistakes. Like, we just don't see people screwing up that much. I mean, we see in the crypto land, right, where people are a little bit more sort of degenerated. They tend to do things like, for example, people will DM them asking them for their seed. That happened a lot of Ledger because they do advertise to people who tend to not understand what they're doing, not understand what a seed is, for example. And they will give away their seeds on a DM, somebody pretending to be of Ledger, right? We've seen that happen. I think the main lesson is, if you're going to take a responsibility, like do a little bit of learning, and double check that this is for you.
Yeah, it definitely takes some studying, and it is quite terrifying that first time that you take self-custody, take the Bitcoin off the exchange and send it to your own address because you've never done it before, right? And what you guys create over at Coinkite, of course, is the Coldcard Q, and it's sort of like the Porsche of Bitcoin hardware wallets. And there's so many ways to use it. there must be so many tricks and little things that are capable on this device that I myself am not using yet. What are some of the hidden talents of the Coldcard queue that people should be aware of?
Oh man, it's kind of like it feels like infinite these days. So we have this thing called spending policy. It's super powerful. It works with single sig or multi sig. But what's really cool is you can set that specific device to not be allowed to send more than a certain amount of coins, or not be allowed to send to any address that's not part of a whitelist, for example. So let's say you need to travel, right? And you have a Bitcoin back loan somewhere. And like you don't want to leave it with that company, but you also want to be able to like send the funds, right? So you could set up a Coldcard for that trip, right? That is fully hobbled. Like it cannot do anything else but to send a maximum amount of coins that you define to a specific address of that company. It cannot do anything else, right? And if you want to go extra paranoid to that, you don't even have to take the device with you. You can take just the backup of that device with you in a micro SD card, and then on destination, in a pinch, you can find a friend or buy a Coldcard, right? And get that done in case you need to. Super powerful. What else? We have password manager and secure notes. Like people are using this a lot because it is a very secure environment, much more secure than your normal password managers, right? So, for example, you need some, you want to put the bank account numbers, you want to put like some inheritance instructions, or like, some things that are very private, right? And you don't want that sitting on your computer or password manager. That's a very good place for it. We have key teleport. So, for example, you can set up a Coldcard for, say, your grandma, and she's across country, right? She can like then go on a video call with you, and you can transfer that preset Coldcard to her Coldcard. Cool. And then boom, she's set up, right? Like, and you didn't even have to go there. There's a lot of things like that. It's a very powerful device.
It is, and I've only cracked the surface, but it's been such a reliable hardware wallet for me. And you go to bed sleeping well, knowing that your Bitcoin is secure, very, very secure. Another thing you guys emphasize is air gapped, right? Explain why that is so important.
So when you want to keep digital secrets secure, right? The first thing you do is you take it off the internet, right? So we all know this, right? That's not a very novel idea. Now, USB, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. So these things are connections to devices that are then connected to the internet, right? So what air gapping does is it removes everything. So there is nothing there that could give an attacker a synchronous access to the device. What does that mean? When you're trying to attack something, having response is very helpful to your attack, right? So you go, you knock on the door, you say hello, the door. If the door knocks back, if you knock back or you answer the door, right? Like you're essentially giving the attacker a sense, oh, it's there. That's number one, right? Okay, now tell me your version number because of your USB connection, right? Oh, now I know which version it is. I know which, for example, exploit to try to use, right? And then there is all the other things like bugs that nobody can know everything, right? So there is the unknowns, and having the device fully disconnected really helps with that.
You need that utmost layer of safety, and keeping it off the internet helps you get there. So you obviously are thinking about attack vectors all the time. As someone who makes hardware, that is essentially your job. What kind of mindset do you need to actually build a Bitcoin hardware wallet?
We have an interesting mix inside Coinkite. So I was born and raised in Brazil in the 80s and 90s, right? And Brazil is complicated security wise, right? So I always I grew up having to think about, is the door locked? Do we have good doors? Am I going to get nabbed in this parking lot? Am I going to be robbed in this intersection? Like that kind of mentality I grew up with that. You talk to any Brazilian, it's like the spidey senses go up, as soon as we feel somebody walking around, right? Like
at a red light.
That's right. It's just the reality of life, right? And my co-founder, he used to work on very hardcore systems. Um, and like he's like a bit older than I am, and so it's not part of the web generation. Let's put it this way, right? So, we sort of like started playing around with payment systems, PCI certified systems for like banking payments and things like that, and through that sort of like old school way of thinking about how to defend secrets and defend things, we got to the products that we have now.
And so talk to us, like, what is it like behind closed doors? How do you red team? Like, do you have a specific department in Coinkite who's constantly thinking of ways to attack the Coldcard? What does that look like?
So I think like every feature that we make, we like to sort of like turn on full paranoia, right? So, everybody in the team tries to break things. Everybody in the team tries to like social engineer, like the problems that we have, right? So it's like try to think about like first principles, like for example, some of the pins, like the lockout timer, right? So for example, a bank, right? A bank vault at the branch only opens through certain times of the day. Better safes for homes, like when you put the pin, you set it so that it doesn't open for the next 5 hours or 10 hours, right? So we use this very old school principles, to build the software. And then once we build the software, then we red team the software. We have very, very active, smart users, very, very advanced users, people who have a lot of Bitcoin as users, right? So when we put out features or we shared some features in private, people will help us red team the features as well as non-company people. We have people who do audits on our firmware all the time from outside. They'll send us every time we have an update. People send us messages saying, "Hey, like, why did you do this? Why did you do that?" Like, and we're used to building in public, right? The source code is open, verifiable, right? People review it. People try to break it. Ledger has spent millions of dollars trying to break our devices. And state actors try to break our devices. It's just sort of like it comes to the territory.
So that's the software firmware side. But what about the hardware? I mean, you've got a supply chain and you got to make sure that these devices aren't tampered with on the way to getting to your customer. How do you ensure that?
So Coldcard deploys what's called defense in depth, right? So what is defense in depth? It's nothing is unbreakable given infinite resources and infinite time and infinite samples, right? So we go down the list of design, right, of both hardware and firmware sort of like intertwined on like how can we raise the cost, time, and failure of attacks, right? So, we're gonna add security bags. We're gonna make the secure element, check the firmware coming in and throwing in a red light, green light. We're gonna sign the firmware. We're gonna have the firmware be open and verifiable. We're gonna build the PCB in a way that's harder to attack. And so like there's all these little things add up to so much cost that even people spending millions of dollars, they cannot extract a seed from a Coldcard.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, man. I don't know how you sleep at night having all these people's Bitcoins responsible on your devices, but
we build it for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like that's ultimately the thing. It's like Coldcard was a product for ourselves. Like when we closed our previous custody services, that was like a decade ago kind of thing, right? We were like, okay, great. We need a hardware wallet for our coins, right? And we didn't like what was available. We didn't find it was safe enough. So we're like, okay, well, let's make the paranoid thing, and then hopefully other people like it, and people do. When you're dogfooding to that extent, you stand by your principles.
Yeah. Had you built hardware before, and how much more fun is hardware than software?
Yes, we did. Like hardware is hard. That's why it's fun, right? Like you can't. Like we have memory constraints, we have processing constraints, we have cost constraints, we have manufacturing constraints. It's like you live in a world, like in a real world, right? It's like a car. If you're building a car, it needs to roll. It needs to not lose the wheels at a certain speed, but you can't also just go like web services and just stick a credit card and say, hey, just give me more resources, right? Like you can't. You have to ship the thing. So I think that a lot of the joy comes from the constraints.
I hear that. And then just rounding out this self-custody part of the conversation, what percentage of the world do you think will actually self-custody at its apex?
That's a hard one. Okay, let me put it to you this way. So wealth distribution in the world, right, is what? Like a basis point of the world owns 99% of all the wealth, right? So Bitcoin is a fair system, right? And is available to anyone. So if we manage to 10x wealth distribution by just being fair, right? So if you actually work hard, you get access to the capital, right? We're now at 0.1%, right? If we 100x wealth distribution, we get to 1%. So, when I tell people Bitcoin is precious, it really is, but that doesn't mean Bitcoin doesn't help everybody else, right? It just means that through exposure to Bitcoin, through other means, meaning L2s or financialized products, everybody benefits from sound money, right? So that's sort of how I like to think about it.
That makes sense. And yeah, it's the dream of everybody, all 8 billion people on this planet holding UTXOs just mathematically doesn't work. So
no, it does not.
Yeah. Well, then that brings us to the larger community. I've heard you talking about Bitcoin at the moment. You say it's weird. The vibes are off. It feels kind of dead. We're at the bottom of a bear market, right? I mean, sentiment is pretty bad right now. What's your take on Bitcoin in 2026 from the person perspective?
I think that people forgot about the memes, right? And money only exists through memes. All money through history, right? It's all about confidence, right? And selling an idea. Because again, subjective value, right? So if you don't capture the minds and you don't capture the oxygen that's available, there's only so much attention. There's only so much capital that is available, right? So if you don't capture the imagination of people, you lose. Right? It really is that simple, right? Gold was stuffed in places, right? And it was capturable. And the fiat people created, a whole sort of vibe around it, right? It's hey, with this thing now you can transport, you can divide, and we can do more with this, right? We can produce things, we can create credit and do all this stuff, right? So I think it's important for people not to forget that Bitcoin is an idea.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what happened in this cycle. It's people stop memeing. People stop advertising Bitcoin's value proposition, which is freedom. And, now you're going to eat, the lack of attention.
Yeah, and the attention has really turned inward, and there's been a lot of bickering over BIP 110. From a technical standpoint, can you break down both sides, try to steel man both sides, and explain this debate?
Oh, man. It's such a pointless thing. It's so annoying. Okay, so premise, I am on the camp of, I don't extra crap on chain. Be great. But I'm also a freedom maxi, right? So, the way Bitcoin was built, right? You can stuff things on chain in multiple ways, right? There's a million ways to do it. Casey was very bright on how he hacked the ordinals into it. And the way that he did it, it's very hard to block it. You can't block it, right? The freedom node sort of showed that's impossible to block, right? And Bitcoin was designed so that nobody can block anybody else's transaction if the transaction is invalid, right? And you are now in a position where you have a fork trying to filter these things. I don't believe it works. is unsustainable. You can delete some blocks here and there now, but like it's unsustainable. And it's centralized, single maintainer. It has a bunch of other sort of issues that I don't like. I like how Ocean started. I like Datum. It was, like a great way to decentralize mining before Stratum V2 came out. It just came out. And I think they sort of like mixed the mission of decentralizing mining with their personal preferences. I think people forgot that the enemy is the central banks, and they decided to just fight each other. I mean, Bitcoiners have been fighting each other since the beginning of time. The block size debate is since beginning of time. Like a lot of these discussions are not new. Okay, Luke tried to filter out Eric Van Hor's Satoshi Dice blocks way back then. So like none of these things are new. They just keep on coming back. I think there's a lot of people that don't understand Bitcoin technically, with the best intentions, may lose a lot of money on this fork, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think it's just a waste of everybody's energy.
A lot of energy has been expended on this debate, but let's talk about the fork itself. For those of us who were not here back in 2017 when Bcash forked off and there was an airdrop, what is it like when you receive this new coin, and how do you get rid of it without doxing your stack?
So right now, I haven't checked the current state of their fork proposal, but the last I checked, there was no replay protection. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that if you spend a coin on the other fork and this chain sees it, you could be sending your coins into like a burning address. So essentially, you could lose your money. So until they add replay protection, which they don't want to because you will cause them to become an altcoin, right? So if they add replay protection, now you can spend both coins separately, right? Now you are essentially another coin. And if you don't have the majority of consensus on this, you are for sure going to become, like a minority sort of coin, right? Like you're going to become the fork. So what I would recommend people is do not, like, if you're going to follow BIP 110, like power to you, do your thing. You're free to do so. Just don't spend your coins until the dust settle on a no replay protection.
That's kind of scary. And
it's very.
I think people should be more aware of that. We definitely need to be talking about that on Bitcoin News. What do you think that we've learned from this whole escapade?
I think nothing. I think it's like the first time where it's like nothing was learned, everything was just lost. Like, on previous forks, I think, we first of all, we had enough consensus. We had we were winning technically in terms of like our point. It was a shame that we raised the block size. I don't think we should have on the last block, but that was the compromise. We had to do it, or we were going to lose a huge part of the network. So, that's that. On this time around, it's just loss of energy. Like, I understand why you don't like it. I understand why I don't like it, but like it's you can't fix it. I'm yet to see a proposal that actually fixes the problem. Mm-hmm. And most people don't even think it's a problem. So
yeah, I mean, Saylor came out yesterday and he said
it's a very tough
one
place
sat
to be
per
in.
V-byte. Like, what are you talking about? Spam problem? It's 1 sat per V-byte. Like the transaction costs are not high.
Yes.
What are you?
The witness discount was a mistake too. You could see it that way. You could see it differently. I think Bitcoin has been sort of a bit over-engineered the last few years too. Like there's a lot of things that were unnecessary trying to accommodate Lightning, which you can see in many different ways. But it's many design decisions were made based on L2s, which is not a priority, right? I mean, this is a hard money proposition, and I think a lot of the core disdain came from a time where COVID happened, the woke war happened, those things happen at the same time as the degen on chain dickbutts, right? So it's just like it was kind of like a big soup of disagreements, right? That most of it had nothing to do with the actual technical part of Bitcoin. You had core elements that were very not ideal to be sort of like front facing people for core, that essentially chose to just incite more disdain from people who may not technically understand what was going on. So it's just a lot of shit from both sides. It's just very untasteful from both sides, and I think it's just snowballed more attrition where there shouldn't have been.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. And I think my concern moving forward from this is what happens when Bitcoin actually does need to change. I mean, quantum is a threat. It's still nebulous. We don't know when it's going to happen, but it probably will happen. Whether it's 5, 10, 20 years from now, we're going to need to upgrade Bitcoin to be quantum resistant at some point. Who has the social
Maybe
capital?
not.
You don't think so?
So like the quantum conversation is interesting. I put out 15,000 words on it on Bitcoin Quantum.fun. A lot of AI research, by the way. And honestly, and I talked to a lot of like interesting people who are deep into that sort of like a problem. The reality is that we just don't know. I mean, there is a chance there's a very good chance. I attribute to like 60-70% chance we don't get quantum computers that are scalable, at least not in decades or more, right? There's just a good chance. It's just we don't get there. Essentially, like we're building, it's like we have time machine math, right? We have time machine math propositions. We don't have time machine manufacturing. Like we're just not there, right? And you talk to people deep into AI, oh, the machines are going to kill us all in 10 years, right? Like you talk to quantum people, oh, we're not going to have encryption in 10 years. You talk to doctors, oh, everybody's going to have cancer. Like it's like any person who's like too deep into the problem thinks the world's going to end tomorrow, right? So I am just not that concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And everybody's selling their book, right? Whether you're a VC or a quantum lab.
No, I mean, like, it's not even necessarily like the financial incentive, right? Like, I mean, many are, as we've seen, the quantum discussion was very interesting. But like engineers or researchers, like they actually like believe it's just, they're just too close to the fire, right? So they think that fire is going to burn everybody else. They're just too close.
So does that mean that you think Bitcoin is at a state where it could almost ossify?
Yeah. I mean, we're fine. And I believe that, we're going to, at some point, have some very good proposals on how to quantum proof Bitcoin. It will take a while, and we're going to do that very slowly, and it's going to be great. Like, there is no rush in any of this stuff. The only thing we're going to have to fix is the Unix time code on Bitcoin. There is no choice of that one. It breaks if we don't. But aside from that, like, I'm still running core version 19. It works great. Yeah. Like, there's no problems with it.
That's solid. The beautiful thing.
Solid, right? So like there is no reason, there is no rush to deal with anything. The only people that, like, for example, must upgrade their nodes is like people who mine, right? And people who are running Lightning nodes because there's some issues with that. But aside from that, I mean, like, everybody else is like, if you're using bunker coin, as they used to like to call it, you're totally fine.
Nice. Well, I mean, I think one thing that's sort of taken up a lot of the thought power in Bitcoin recently, of course, has been AI. And I know that you're deep down the rabbit hole of AI. Do you think that AI is for everyone more so than Bitcoin is for everyone?
Oh, I don't think. See, like, Bitcoin is available to anyone, right? But it's still a choice, right? Like, sure, you may make the argument that it's not a choice, that you're going to have to own it, right? Because otherwise you're going to have fun staying poor. But AI, on the other hand, is like the pen, right? And then the keyboard. It's such a multiplier on a human ability, right? It's not an asset; it's a multiplier, right? So you are not going to be able to compete as a person in the market, right? Like with your skills, right? Like as a job or as an inventor, whatever it is that you do, or even in your daily life, right? You're not going to be able to exist without, you know, like leveraging LLMs. The same way you can't exist anymore without a computer. Like a farmer has a computer. Farmers use pictures from space of their crops, right? And we're talking about old school farming here. Like you look at like vineyards, right? Like vineyards are the people who spend the most amount of money on ultra high tech stuff without having to put like chemical crap on their crops, right? So like ultra premium sort of like yield, right? And then you see the same with the rest, right? Like it's just you cannot say no to a 1000x multiplier to your skill set, right? Like it's just impossible. So people are gonna have to use it even if they want to, and most people won't even know that they're using it. The same way you Google, right? You're like no, like people don't Google anymore. People ChatGPT it.
100%. And I mean, you have, of course, decades in software. You're a builder, so it sort of comes naturally for you to sit down with this thing and jive with it, vibe code, make new stuff. For people who don't have that background, what kind of advice do you have for them getting into AI?
I have two websites that is like a little fun meme on it. So, remember the Learn to Code meme, New York Times, way back then? Okay, so Learn to Code, right? So learntoprompt.org. So learn to prompt or you're screwed, and learn to Bitcoin.org. Those two things are the most important things that you could be doing with your life right now. It's like you have to cement your anti-debasement, your financial sovereignty, and you have to understand and be productive where the world is going with AI. Like there is no escaping, there is no sticking your hand in the sand. There's nothing you can do. Like you're gonna have to do those two things, or you're gonna have fun staying poor.
You got to be playing with it. You got to learn some Bitcoin, learn some AI, and you'll be well set up for the future. And when it comes to the future, America has been pioneering a lot of this AI stuff. And in your last conversation with Marty, you sounded extremely bullish on America. Do you think that America is going to lead us into a brighter future, or is it going down the same path as, say, Europe?
I think like America, well, first of all, like America is almost the size of Europe, or actually is bigger than Europe. Like America is many Americas, right? So you have different states. You have like it's almost like multiple countries, right? And you have the correct framework. It's the only left framework where individuals have like ultimate capacity of responsibility, right? Because it is sort of like democracy 3.0, right? Like you had one type, and then you have parliamentary system, and then now you have like this presidential sort of system you guys have. It's fully imperfect, but it is an upgrade. The founders saw the previous stuff, and they're like, "Hey, we don't want kings," and then they upgraded the system, right? So I am very bullish because America is one of the only places in the world where people actually work. Like the work ethic of your average American is absolutely like insane. It's like 100x everybody else. People have to work in places that are like less wealthy just because they have to. See, America is one of those places where people want to work, which is very rare, right? And people want to build. Why? Because you have a framework that, like, if you do those things, you do improve your life, right? And so like I think Americans woke up during this last president, and they're like, fuck it, we actually like to work. Like, let's like make it easier so that we can actually do the fucking work, right? And then you have all the fake enemies stuff going on, all the world politics where everybody's just stealing money, but it works, right? Like, the boogeyman, whatever that country is, and they're like, we must manufacture here. We want to bring those, like, we want to have jobs that are this kinds of stuff. So you essentially created the vibe, the meme, again of like, let's create like a good country, like make America great again, however you like to see it, but like it is a meme, right? And memes like work. Like they are viral in nature, right? It is, they infected the majority of the population, and people want to build things like locally now, right? It's going to take 2-3 decades. In China, they make engineers, they don't make, like theater majors, right? So but they also have, whatever concerns they have there. It's a very different, it's an uncomparable system. Anyways, my point is this: like, it is a country that decided to win again, right? To do things for the sake of doing them locally better, more interestingly, to advance things, right? And that's like a very powerful frame to be in. And like it's working. I mean, like, like, and you guys get to export your debt too, which is, absolutely insane. Like,
it helps.
Like a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, being an American myself, living here, it's a very interesting time to be alive. It sort of feels Dickinsonian, and it's the best of times, it was the worst of times, right? I mean, there's so much hope and promise, and yet there's so many people just being lost to nihilism and financial nihilism.
I mean, woke culture got murdered in America. Like, I mean, like, the majority of the rhetoric now is not like, oh, don't use plastic straw, don't, DEI this, whatever the fuck it is, right? Like, you guys snapped out of it. Right, the rest of the world is doubling down on it.
The pendulum has swung, but you can feel it's still there, right? And I think there are some people who are waiting to pounce to go even further, right? If we get a Democrat in 2028, I mean, the wealth taxes and just the anti billionaire stuff is just going to be ramped up to 11.
I mean, you could make the case that like if Kamala had won, Bitcoin would be worth a lot more now. Like Bitcoin is kind of like anti-fiat, right? So like, the worse it gets, the better it is for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like that meme, but it is true.
I 100% think that. And that was actually the subject of our last interview with Dave Weisberger. He said what could guarantee $1 million Bitcoin? President AOC. So that's
oh, I mean, wow. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Cool. Okay, then I want to end on a personal note. So I saw a tweet of yours recently. You said, let your kids be bored. And me growing up, one saying that my mom left me with is, if you're bored, you're boring. Why in this age of AI and iPads, is it so important to let kids just not be on these things?
Like the purpose of a childhood is for you to imagine, right? Like it's for you to just like let your brain sort of feel the space, right? Like, I grew up, when I was a kid, there were like no cell phones yet. And they were like, and the computers were just very early, right? Like I was early on the computers, but it was still like, this massive thing, in the bedroom, right? So, what did I do? Like I get out there, like I go play in the park, I go play in the farm, I'd be out there, I'd be poking shit with a stick. You put little bombs on the poop and make the poop explode. Like you do all this, like the most idiotic, childish things ever. Like the whole point is to be childish, right? Is to do those things. And I think like presenting children and bringing to children the adult world is robbing them of their childhood, right? Like the kids are supposed to be like alone doing a bunch of stupid shit, and then you have the learn time, right, where you teach them stuff, right, that be school or you or whatever, and they're supposed to see you fixing a car, and they're supposed to like just observe the world, participate in this world, exist in a bubble. Really, they shouldn't be exposed to politics. They should just wonder, right? And learn how to be bored, be present, be sort of with themselves, and figure out what to do, right? Like, because like the majority of inventions, the majority of like, all the interesting came from people just being bored. I think it was NASA who did a study in the 50s or 60s on like, how do we find geniuses? It's a very fair proposition, right? For a thesis or a research, right? Like how do we find geniuses, right? And if I remember right, like the outcome of that research was like they ended up finding them in farms, because those kids were bored all the time, free all the time. They were not tainted with this very sort of like specific rigid frameworks, right? Like they saw their parents fixing stuff with what's available. They built things with things that are not purposeful toys, right? So they would build like a shed with like scraps of wood, right? They would build, a hole, fill it up with water and play in the mud, right? So they were able to do those things, and that produced children that were capable of understanding that, like, it's great to have a math framework, but like, that's not a requirement. Like, I mean, maybe you come up with a way around it, right? Like, and that's how you invent new things, is by going around what's available today, right? Like, if you ask a seasoned engineer, can we build this? No, that's impossible. It's $1 billion to do that, like, and then, if you ask like a naive young engineer, yeah, sure, I'll start now, and then in the middle, you're going to find the truth, right? So anyways, I think it's both like, a personal thing. I think kids are happier that way. I think they're saner that way. My kids don't get video, tablets, phones, nothing. It's like they have to just exist without all this crap. I don't want them exposed to politics. I want them to just experience the natural world.
And that's how you create a lot more geniuses. Well, NVK, thank you so much. That was such a fun, wide-ranging conversation. I appreciate you. And I know you've got a new product coming out. So it's called Arca. Where should people go to find out more about that?
So Arca is going to be a place for you to create inheritance, for you to create high availability of your secrets. It's sort of like in the same train as the things we already do. And you can go to arcasafes.com. There's a subscribe there for the mailing list, and there's also at Arca Safes on Twitter, and you can keep track of that. It's going to be a banger. We're building another product for ourselves, and nobody else willing to build it.
There you have it. All right. Thank you so much, NVK.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a like, share it with a friend, become a subscriber, of course, and turn on notifications so that you know when the next one comes out. If you'd like to dive deeper, be sure to check out our latest interview with Jamie Couts, a global liquidity expert who gives us the signs to look for when Bitcoin has finally bottomed and is ready to begin a new bull market. I'll see you over there.